bit of something different today and over the next couple of weeks training outside on the cricket oval. I mean, just before most of the AFL boys came out, you're actually sharing the oval with a few kids that were kicking the footies around. Have you enjoyed that? There's something different, training out on the oval and being a bit close to, community netball and footy kind of thing?
Yeah, we are fortunate here. Well, actually, I shouldn't say fortunate because there was a lot of pressure on the footy club 25 years ago to move away from Geelong. And quite rightly, the ground itself gets, and the redevelopment of the stadium gets the plaudits it deserves, but the whole precinct's really impressive. And if you see it, say, on a Tuesday night, for example, and there are thousands of kids running around on netball courts and out on St Mary's and the cricket oval, it's a bit more of a suburban feel at times, but we do like that.
We have to go out to Deakin as well, Chris, at some stage.
Invariably we do at times throughout the year for various reasons. So, I'm not exactly sure the way we're going to handle it at this stage.
Hollywood Shire is just a fantastic story, and it'll have its next chapter written tomorrow at the MCG. As a coach, can you talk to us about your excitement about giving somebody an opportunity, especially those who haven't done it the traditional pathway?
Yeah, I think it's always exciting when young players force their way into the team, but the ones that have come from a long way back, and in reality, they are speculative picks, these types, and I shouldn't really sort of generalise when it comes to Ollie, and I will get specific about him, but Stephen Wells has done a fantastic job in, as much as anything, backing his eye, I think, which is incredibly difficult to do. I don't have the skill to assess a player at a much lower level and make the judgment that the attributes that he has at that level are going to translate into the top level. And even Wellesley would say it was a speculative pick, but he saw something. And so it's so satisfying for those guys in particular when the young players force their way in. And that's what Ollie's done. You follow him closely, Kingy, and the VFL program in general. He's been playing well enough for a long time to justify his position. It's just that a spot hasn't opened up. So and I don't mind passing on that, I've said to Ollie that we haven't brought him in because we think he can look okay at the level. We've brought him in because we're certain that he can have a big impact, and I'm really confident that he'll do some nice things tomorrow. Again, we don't run, a under 12s everyone gets a prize program. It's a meritocracy, and he's deserved his spot.
What is it just Geelong's recruitment department that's seen you guys recruit so many guys from that kind of background, from local footy backgrounds, and have them succeed at the highest level? Do you pay more attention to local footy than other clubs, do you think, or is it just the brilliance of Stephen Wells? Maybe.
I'm very quick to sort of share the credit across the department, but I think this one is a specific Stephen Wells one. And maybe it's a geographic thing. Ollie's from sort of Bowen Heads. Maybe there's a slight advantage there, but it's only an hour from Melbourne. You can get in the car and come down and see those guys if you want. Maybe the word of mouth thing counts for a bit more down here, but that's the part that I really admire about Wellesley. There's a number of examples. Mark Blitzarves is another one that springs to mind and so they tell me Max Rook was a bit the same, where you kind of hear about this kid, it would be so easy just to fob that off, but Wellesley follows it all up. His attention to detail, is as good as I've ever seen when it comes to these sort of picks. So we'll be beaming tomorrow, as will the people close to Ollie, but Wellesley will be one of the happiest men in Australia tomorrow.
People at Bowen Heads are holding their breath. Do they have to wait until 20 past 2 tomorrow to find out whether he'll be in the 22 or the sub, or have you made that decision? No,
he won't be the sub. So I'd rarely give that information. And that, as everyone knows, the rules are we finalise our team an hour before the game, and make absolutely no apologies for that. But the plan at the moment is for Ollie to be in the 22.
Just on a bit of track watches from today, so Bailey Smith and Tyson Stengel didn't really do much out there. Is there anything to worry about for their prep for the week?
No, there would have been a heap of others that you might have noticed not do much. They have a very individual prep, especially, I hesitate to say it's a 6-day break. That doesn't really mean anything to us other than the day before the game's a little different to it is on a 7-day break.
How do you plan to use Patrick Dangerfield tomorrow? You know, when Carlton are up and winning, everyone always talks about how they play like a team that's coached by Michael Voss with the ferocity around the contest.
Yeah.
Do you try and bring Danger maybe more into the midfield to combat, you know, the contest work of a Cripps type figure?
Yeah, it's a good point, and it will be horses for courses to a large degree for us, and yeah, it didn't necessarily. It was not as if we thought we can play him forward against Hawthorn last week because we didn't rate their midfield. That they, but the equation's always going to be relatively simple for us. It's like if we're getting beaten in there, he'll be in the middle a little bit more. But right at the moment, we've got a lot of confidence that we've got some guys in good form there. Now, I'm not suggesting that they're Patrick's Cripps or Sam Walsh or like Chera. Hewitt's been in great form as well, so they run deep in there. Tom De Koning's in good form, has been for a long time as a ruckman, so clearly that's a strength of theirs. But I think what we've been aspiring to do for a long time is sort of move away from thinking that Tom Stewart or Patrick Dangerfield are the only ones that can get it done. So yes, I think you'll play some midfield time, but I'd be surprised if it was an overreaction or a situation where we were panicking because good Carlton players got a few clearances. That's going to happen.
Just on Mitch Nevitt, Chris, it's been listed as a foot. He was in the squad Thursday, but you've taken him out yesterday. Can you just shed some light on the seriousness, if any, of that? It's
not much more serious than it has been. So he's been managing that for a while. I think we brought it up a couple of weeks ago. So I hesitate to talk about this in detail because I could get the detail wrong, but it's a plantar fascia issue that he's been able to play with. We have a very low tolerance for young players, playing inhibited over a long period of time. It flared a little bit last week. He's a really tough kid, and he just would play through it if he had the option. But we chose not to give him that option. Obviously, we're guided by the medical team, and they think the best course of action, given that sort of conservative philosophy that we have, is to try to use the next few weeks probably to get it right. So it'd be unlikely that he'll come back in the next week or two. But you never know. Like, it might come good quite quickly. But the information I've got is that that's unlikely. So a bit disappointing for Mitch because he was going really well for us.
Do you have a word to Bailey through the week, just with the another bird sort of flying out in the footy to the head of Jarman? Is that something that you talk to him through the week and say, maybe we try and settle down a little bit during the game, or is it one that you don't really just happy for him to go out and kind of do his thing?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very, very minor. I mean, the fact that it's a fine, is bewildering to me. The same with obscene gestures. I mean, maybe they're a bit prudish at the AFL. So he spoke to me about it. I reinforced to him that, we do want him to be himself. We're not trying to curtail him too much, but there will be a point that there's a framework that he needs to work within, the same as our other players. But I think there are far more serious things in the game that should be addressed. And I get it that he's a high-profile player, and there's some engagement with the crowd as well. And again, I would kind of query how consistent the AFL are with these things. On one hand, they seem to love it and promote things like Gather Round and Port and Hawthorn, and then on the other hand, they seem to feel like they need to fine people for stuff that they're promoting. I'd pick a side if I were them.
Do you think that, I guess, the AFL sort of overreaches in that sense, in terms of...
100% they do. Of course they do. But they would know that too. But in a big organisation, you get some differences of opinion, and sometimes, it's difficult to be consistent.
Playing devil's advocate to that, Chris.
Yeah.
There's kids
you're going to go with the VAFA argument, which is like, we can't have this sort of behaviour because it trickles down to the lower levels.
Does it?
Well, I'm not sure that that's our responsibility. I think we are elite in our, by world standards. This is as high as it gets. Like, for them to be overlaying their obligation that they've chosen to take to grassroots footy onto us. And absolutely when it comes to sort of violence in the game and playing within the rules. I think this stuff is, it just doesn't matter. And I think like in the modern world, like if flipping the bird is just horribly obscene and, you know, a shock to people's senses, then I don't know, that's not the world I'm living in. You get a lot more obscene stuff watching music videos on YouTube, I would suggest.
5 days on, how's Brian Myers progressing through the grades of the concussion protocol?
I don't keep up to it day by day, but I would have got an update if there was an issue. So all my information is that that's tracking along nicely.
Has anything changed for you with your defensive setup, Mackay coming into the team? Like obviously it's you deal with the system, but have another common medalist come back in, it's an issue, I guess, for your defence in some way. It'd be easier for us if he wasn't playing, and they haven't played together much for a little while, Curnow and Mackay. So that I would suggest that is a good thing for them, but maybe lacking a little bit of cohesion. That's a bit of the unknown. So I think I've said this a few times. We never just say, oh, we'll just play whoever's there. We're always quite thoughtful about the opposition and the strengths they have, and those two guys are, you know, pretty obvious. You don't need to watch them too much to realise how good they can be. So yeah, we will adjust slightly based on the strength of their forward line overall. Just on the boys, obviously had a pretty rough start to the year, but we've had 2 massive wins, albeit West Coast and North, probably 2 of the weaker sides in the comp. What have you noticed about the Blues through, watching the tapes and whatever you guys are doing through the week?
Yeah.
It's changed in the last 2 weeks that you might be more wary of?
No, I think it's more a function of the draw than it is that they're playing better or worse or differently. And I think that's just the reality of like the bizarre fixture that we choose to run. You're going to get ebbs and flows, but based on a really kind of uneven fixture. And so what that means for all teams, I think, is that you've got to accept that there are going to be sort of little quirks in there, and if you rely too much on form lines and win-loss in the short term, you're likely to be deceived. So the last 2 weeks, they've had good wins and won well. I think what's becoming clearer now that we're kind of 6 rounds in is that like Collingwood are a pretty good team. The Bulldogs look like a pretty good team. And the reality is Carlton have been in front at half-time every game they've played this year. So I generally think there's a bit of an overreaction when there's high expectations associated with a team like Carlton at the start of the year, then they happen to lose some close games. It's that the overreaction is, much more likely than the realistic kind of, cold analysis that we try to make. So we're still really aware of, how good they can be, and we didn't think they were going that badly in the first month anyway.
What did you make of the comms outage at the MCG yesterday, with both clubs not being able to communicate from coach's box to bench? How frustrating is that, and how would you have sort of handled that as a coach if it happened to you?
Oh, no idea, really. And I'm not really across the detail of it. I actually wasn't watching at that point and haven't sort of followed up on it.
So it was about a 15-minute block in the third quarter,
yeah,
where the phones and communication between coach's box and bench, and I think access to key stats as well went down for both teams.
Yeah, so probably what would have happened if the clubs did something that the AFL didn't like, they would have fined us. That's what they do.
So is there, is the Coaches Association mechanism by which you guys can say something? No way. So how do you, when something like that happens, and as a coaching department, you're frustrated, what's your way of...
Oh, you just move on, because that's the way their world works. Like when they see something they don't like, they punish people. When they muck up, maybe they'll say sorry. But even that's unlikely.
Has it always been like this through your coaching tenure, or is it something that you found as...
Which bit?
In terms of not really feeling like there's a two-way street with communication and frustrations that the coaches are having?
No, I'm not talking about this issue because I don't know anything. I'm talking more broadly. But again, like I would imagine that I tend to be an outlier on these things. We don't punish our players, and we certainly don't fine them. So I don't believe it that it's a good policy in general. And I could talk for a long time about it. They know what I think. They just don't particularly care. They think it's good policy to throw out fines left, right, and centre. Is it a deterrent? I would argue no, it's not. Does it treat them like juveniles? I think it does. They say the money goes to concussion research. Wouldn't mind auditing that.
Jack Kolodowski.
We should only have 2 of you every time. It'd be more fun.
Jack Kolodowski.
Yep, I know who you mean.
Yeah,
Yep.
I've been saying it for 12 years. You expect him to be right. I know it's just a minor thing that kept him out last week, but what are you hoping to see out of him? And is it a short stint in the VFL, or does he need to get some game time under his belt for, I know VFL by next week?
Yeah, so that's a bit challenging with the bye next week. So we're not after much more than just match practice and just the next step in his preparation. So not a really close lens on like his form necessarily. So it was just a back spasm last week that held him up, but it was minor enough that he was able to get some really good training. So we don't think that's held him up too much. So if he gets some good match practice and comes through that pretty well, I don't think he'll be much further back in our mind than he would have been had he got match time last week.
I understand Jeff Hughes was actually fairly close to running around in the VFL tomorrow.
Yeah, so but with the bye next week, there was no point sort of rushing him through, and we're thinking, I know, as Jed is, we're just thinking a little bit sort of longer term. It's not a matter of rush some game time into him and then rush him into the AFL team. It's going to be a bit longer. So in that context, waiting an extra week, which ends up being 2 weeks with the bye, just seemed prudent.
I asked this question in regards to just Mitch Duncan. You know, everybody sees he's on 296 and discussion around milestones and stuff like that. I suspect I know the answer, but I'll ask the question anyway.
Yeah.
Does it factor into your thinking that people will go, this is probably the last answer for Mitch, his career's kept near the end, but will he be afforded that opportunity to join a rare club?
Yeah, I hope so. But we didn't keep him on the list, so we could get him to 300. I think it's instructive. Now, Steve Hocking doesn't absolutely run everything at this club, but he played 199 games, and with the greatest of respect, I don't think it sort of, stings every day that he didn't get that extra game. Like, we've got bigger priorities than sort of individual milestones. They're nice when they come along, and if it can happen, I think we'll all celebrate it rightly. And maybe I'm a little bit different to most. Like Mitch, I've loved working with Mitch, but 296 games versus 300 doesn't. It's not the deciding factor in the way I think about him. But look, I'm very, very optimistic he'll get there, and he is going well too. So we got pretty good availability, and it's one of those things too that, like, timing is so important. Sometimes there's one thing losing players, but sometimes you lose players all in one spot and you've got a sort of embarrassment of riches in another part of the ground, and that's a little bit where we are at the moment. But no, Mitch will come in at some stage soon, I think.